60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. It is Friday, June 25th, the last official visit weekend of the June cycle. So, lots of stuff going on, but obviously there's more going on if we are going to talk about the official visits in the second segment of the BIA show. I want to bring in Joseph Hastings, our fantastic recruiting analyst, and some breaking news out there. Sometimes things just work out perfectly. We had this show planned to record all along, and about 5 minutes before we put the recorder on, Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports reporting some big news regarding defensive lineman class of 2021, JT Tuimoloau. Joseph, take it away.
Yes, Kevin. Once again, pleasure to be speaking with you again. And yeah, the breaking news today is that JTT, Ohio State's lone remaining target in the 2021 class, will not be taking his official visit to Alabama this weekend. That is fairly significant news for the Buckeyes and just Buckeye Nation in general, as Alabama was viewed as the school that could potentially usurp Ohio State here. You know, all the predictions for JTT to Ohio State have been poured in, over the past year or so, mostly in favor of the Buckeyes. But Alabama has been that one school that people have been paying attention to. And with that official visit being canceled, the last official visit that he'll be taking, you can't think of a better case scenario for Ohio State. Once again, we also have to consider Oregon in this one here, just because they're located, fairly close to JTT. They did get the last visit. Maybe he thought very highly of this visit, and he just wanted to focus on either Oregon or Ohio State, and maybe USC and Washington on the outside looking in. So I don't know if you can completely rule out the Ducks just based on how the visit may have gone for him, how his family may have received it. But I interpret this as best case scenario news for Ohio State, the coaching staff, and just the fan base in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of look at it through a little bit of a mixed lens. I don't know if I'd say any of it is negative, but the best news is obviously that Alabama's out. And whatever your stance is, I mean, Alabama having a last visit seems to be a bit of a scary proposition. They certainly have come in and been able to swoop and land kids, and this is not just something of Alabama head-to-head against Ohio State. This has just been reality out there. So with Alabama being out, I mean, it's not that they're not getting the official, but he's still considering them. According to Huffman's article, Alabama off the table at this point. It certainly looks good for Ohio State, but you're right in saying you can't discount Oregon, who now had the de facto final visit. You can't discount USC. You can't discount Washington, the hometown team, because we really have never had a snapshot into what JTT is thinking. And that's just, again, in a lot of ways, a credit to him for keeping this completely under wraps. So outside of maybe an occasional, something from a relative or the one reporter who happens to be Brandon Huffman who gets to speak to JTT, we've never really seen the methodology here.
We really haven't. So we haven't been able to, get a little bit of in-depth look into how JT operates, what he considers the most, what he values the most in his recruitment. I know he did a few interviews early on with Rivals.com, when he was a rising junior and all that, but things have obviously changed since then. He hasn't, even his family members don't speak with the media too often. I was able to speak with a couple of his uncles, and even then, they're very tight-lipped. They keep things close to the vest. So that's how the JTT and the whole family are operating. So we really don't know what's going on here. I think if the best case scenario, outside of the one that Ohio State just got, would have been if he had canceled Oregon and Alabama following that Ohio State trip. I think you feel a lot more confident if you're the Buckeyes if he does that. But with it coming right off of the Oregon visit, he just wrapped it up. You have to take into account the fact that Oregon may have made such a strong impression on him that, maybe they've elevated themselves up higher in his recruitment than they had initially been. And he wants to focus on those 4 schools that we had talked about beforehand. So once again, it's good that Alabama is out of the picture if you're Ohio State, just because you have Nick Saban there, who has 7 national championships as a head coach. You've got the pedigree that is Alabama, their defensive line production. All of that stuff is worth taking into account and being wary of if they would have gone the final official visit. But you can't rule out Oregon, especially with Mario Cristobal. He's an excellent recruiter as a head coach. They landed Kayvon Thibodeau a couple of cycles ago, who was a 5-star defensive end. So you can't rule them out necessarily. I still am siding with my Ohio State pick. I'm not changing that just yet. And since this is still purely a reactionary podcast, we haven't been able to do any digging, outside of the news that we just heard. But yeah, I think, it being narrowed down from 5 to 4 is definitely better than if he had taken that official visit to Alabama and still had them in consideration.
You're listening to the BIA podcast, Buckeye Grove Instant Access. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. If you're not a member of Buckeye Grove yet, take advantage of our soon-to-expire free trial. Use offer code VISITS 2021, VISITS 2021. Get a free trial through August 10th. This deal ends at the end of this month, so don't miss out. We do not offer a ton of free trials. Get on board. And we're talking about JT Tuimoloau and everything that's going on. Now, you sit there and you kind of look at this, and the problem with JTT is he doesn't talk to the media, and even though he does talk to one reporter, we don't know if that's always on the regular. So if we knew that he made this decision today or yesterday, I think it has a very different impact than if he made the decision that he wasn't going to go to Oregon as soon, or go to Alabama as soon as he got back from Oregon. If that was like a Monday decision or Tuesday, I get Wednesday, I don't even know what day of the week. Because he did the back-to-back trips. But there's certainly, is this a reaction of, all right, now that I've done the 3 local-ish schools, being, the 3 schools west of the Rockies, I know what a distance school has to offer in Ohio State, and I don't need to see Alabama because Ohio State checks off the boxes. Is it all right, I've seen what I need, and Oregon has fulfilled everything I need? Wouldn't JTT, who really has not taken any steps toward being a traditional recruitment, if he knew his decision, wouldn't he just end it at that point? So, I just don't know really how to frame all of this. And Joseph hit the nail on the head. This is very much a reactionary podcast. We have not had an opportunity to do a ton of discussion about this off the air or anything else. So we're kind of spitballing with you, our great listeners. So you're kind of hearing us go through the process, maybe a little more sanitized because we're on the air or whatever. But, we're certainly kind of just trying to get to some conclusions.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to dissect how this one will play out, just because we don't know what JTT is thinking at this time. It's even, you can make the argument that he probably doesn't even know himself. He has the allure of staying in state, representing his state of the Washington Huskies. He has the allure of playing for some other big time Pac-12 teams, specifically USC, which is on the rise, which is recruiting really well, which he has family members who support the program. And then you also have Ohio State, which is competing for national championships, making it to back-to-back college football playoff appearances. But it's also a much further move for him than those other programs, the USC and Oregon and of course, Washington. So it's really hard to dissect this one. I really think the main takeaway that, from Brandon Huffman's article with JTT is that Alabama isn't in consideration. You had mentioned this before, but he had taken a visit to Alabama a couple of years ago. So maybe it would have been understandable if he said, you know what, I've done so much traveling. I've packed all this into 3 weeks. I've been out to Alabama. I know who they are. I don't need to go through that process again. I just want to make this decision as quickly as possible instead of taking another visit. But the fact that Alabama isn't in consideration, I think, is a huge thing as well. I don't believe this is a distance thing with JTT. I don't think distance will come into play here, but you just have to wonder with the past year or so with the pandemic, being closer to home and closer to family, if that draw and not taking those visits is that makes it more appealing to stay closer to home, stay closer to his family members. And you mentioned it here that we are kind of spitballing it because we don't really know what JTT is thinking, but the family side of things, potentially wanting to be closer to home, that could be a factor that JTT is considering, So I think, look, you and I both have our Ohio State picks, and I don't think we're going to change it unless we hear anything drastic. But at the end of the day, he's kept this so close to the vest. He's kept things so under wraps that it really wouldn't surprise me if he decides to go to Oregon, if he decides to go to USC. Heck, at this point, if he decided to go to Washington, I know it would surprise a lot of Ohio State fans, but maybe people in the community there are getting that impression as well, just based off what they heard. But I've tried reaching out to friends of JTT. They've even said that he isn't telling them anything. So at this point, it's kind of a guessing game. But I'm gonna stick with my Ohio State pick for now. Do some further digging, but I think just the biggest thing about this Alabama news is not that he canceled the visit, it's that they're no longer in consideration.
And then let me throw this at you, just as I was sitting here thinking, listening to your answer, and he left his Ohio State visit to immediately start his Oregon visit. And maybe there was already a sense of obligation to take that visit because there wasn't going to be days at home between the one visit to the next visit. We're already, we're already in. We already have, tickets in hand. We have bags packed to account for going from one visit to another. But maybe the Ohio State visit did enough to where after doing, and I don't want to diminish Oregon to the point of just saying it was a courtesy visit. It not a courtesy visit. That's not what I'm implying here. I'm not saying it was courtesy or obligation or anything, but maybe the Ohio State checked off enough boxes at that point that there was no necessity for the fifth visit. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there saying, oh, you're just trying to keep people excited about Ohio State's chances here because you guys have pretty much pegged him to go to potentially all four schools still on his list. Well, that's because we don't know where he's going, and maybe he does deep down know he knows where he's going, but we don't know that. But just something else to consider.
Yeah, I think that is something that I think all options should be on the table right now. Except for the Alabama option. I think all options about where he could potentially go should be out there. It should be considered. I don't think anything is set in stone at this time. And I'm going to take JTT at his word here. I think he's actually evaluating all four schools. Maybe he is. Once again, this is just my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of JTT and his family or anything here. Maybe Washington is in that final group list just to give them a little bit more credibility, help them out in the future. That's still his home state team. It's still the school that he probably watched growing up. So maybe Washington is in there just as a courtesy to them. That could be a thing. Or maybe he actually strongly is considering staying close to home and representing his state at the next level. And once again, I've mentioned the possibility of USC, Oregon, why Ohio State should feel confident as well. I think everything should be kind of on the table here. And I don't know when we should expect a decision. I would probably, I would imagine that it would come in the next week or so. It seems like he's starting to, he's taking these visits. He's going to evaluate all of them. He's taking them in such a short period of time too, which is really interesting. You don't always see this in the recruiting process, but he obviously has a recruitment that can't be compared to any other. So at this point, I think anyone who definitively knows where JTT is going outside of that immediate family, I think you would still have to question it because I don't think anyone really at this point knows where he's going to go. I think all options are on the table for him, and I'm not going to be surprised by any decision that he makes. I'll say that right here. Even though I have the future cast in for Ohio State, even though I still believe that they're the school that will land him, I don't think you can rule out any of those four programs he's considering.
Yeah, about the only thing that I feel confident in saying is that he will probably announce while I am on vacation and out of the country because that seems to be par for the course. And for some of those old timers that are listening here, well before the days of us doing a podcast, right around the time of the commitments of several members of the Brew Crew, the Michael Brewster recruiting class. I was on my honeymoon in Mexico as things went down, and it was very early days of BuckeyeGrove.com. And let me tell you, it was difficult getting recruiting news down in the Cancun area. So, yeah, I would expect to see some sort of decision coming out in the next, 4 to 10 days or something. Maybe something could come out sooner. I don't know. Certainly a lot of feels going on social right now. Ohio State fans are taking probably a little bit of a premature victory lap. There are people that are not a fan of any of the 4 schools, but certainly not Ohio State, who are cheering on Oregon or anybody else, knowing that the addition of somebody like JTT to align with Jack Sawyer, Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith, et cetera, could be problematic. I don't really follow any Oregon fans, so I don't know what they're thinking right now. I need to diversify my Twitter account a little bit. But before we take our quick break and go into the big recruiting weekend that's coming up, any final thoughts on this JTT situation? As again, we heard about the news within about 5-10 minutes of turning on the podcasting machine. We've been spitballing with you, so you kind of see how we're going through our process. I'm obviously going to want to get this podcast turned as quickly as possible, so everything's as fresh as possible. But any other thoughts that maybe we didn't touch upon?
Yeah, Kevin, I think we touched on everything. The last thing I do want to note is that I had it, confirmed that Jack Sawyer will not be changing his number to 40. That was something that came up on Instagram. Some people were wondering, JTT's number is 33. Jack Sawyer posted a picture of him with 40. But no, I did hear that Sawyer will be keeping the double threes. He's going to be sticking with that at the next level. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I knew some people were speculating if that may have had that may have been something that came about as a result of JTT's official visit. But from what I'm hearing, that won't be the case. Last thing I would probably say is just don't be surprised by anything in this recruitment. I know Ohio State fans have kind of, and we have too, because we put in our future cast, roughly a year in advance of this decision. But just don't be surprised by anything. This is a recruitment that is unlike any other, and I don't think you should expect it to go down like any other. So, once again, while I still do believe Ohio State will land them, I don't think you can be surprised by anything any announcement that he makes, whether that's in a few days, in a week or so, whenever he decides to. I think the unexpected should be expected or prepared for at the very least.
There you go. So that's what we have on JTT. If something changes with him before I board a plane to go to my undisclosed vacation hideaway, we will obviously jump on board. If news necessitates me doing a podcast from an island nation, I may do that as well. But we're going to be following that JTT situation as closely as you are, so be sure to keep it locked in at Buckeye Grove and the BIA podcast as well. But we're going to take a quick break here, and we will come back and talk about the official visit weekend of June 25th, an ever-shifting list and kind of our thoughts here on the BIA podcast. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. And welcome back. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. We are talking Buckeyes recruiting here on the BIA podcast. And we now get into the recruiting weekend of the 25th. And that means, some guys will get in here on the 25th. Some guys might not get into the 26th. That all really varies. We saw with JTT, him getting in on a Thursday, but that was because that was considered a travel day. This weekend of the 25th had more names associated to it at one point, but as we told you early on, things, have a cause and effect. And, if something happens, it could mean this. If that happens, it could mean that. So I don't think either of us are expected with a couple of the names dropping off the list, but I'll let Joseph, who's been monitoring our list and keeping a great tab on that, to give the updates on who we were expecting as of a month ago, who it does not appear will be coming out.
Absolutely, Kevin. So we were expecting initially that Kristen Miller, the Rivals 250 defensive tackle out of Cedar Grove High School in Ellenwood, Georgia, would be visiting this weekend. He had taken a 5-day unofficial to Ohio State earlier this month, but recently told me that he had canceled his Ohio State official. It very much seems like USC is the team trending in his recruitment. Following that official visit, following the commitment of his good friend Michael Williamson, Trojan. So not only will Miller not be officially visiting this weekend, but it does seem like he's not going to be ending up with the Buckeyes at the next level. Another Rivals 250 prospect who won't be in town is Amarian Hampton out of North Carolina. So Hampton was kind of the one we were a little bit iffy about with this visit, just because of Down Hayden's situation. Ohio State, we had kind of heard that they may be taking 2 running backs in this class. We don't know. We didn't know at the time, what a Hayden commitment would mean, who they would take as their second option. But we are hearing that Ohio State is set with Hayden. They won't be pursuing any other running backs as of now. That's the plan. And that Hampton won't be officially visiting this weekend. So as of right now, he's off the board. He still doesn't have an offer, of course, but Ohio State seems pretty set with Hayden. And then Markeith Williams, back in April when we took our Sudden Swing trip, we stopped by, spoke with him, 3-star safety out of Orlando. He told our Miami side rivals, King Sport, that he won't be taking this official visit this weekend, so he's off the board. And that's the second safety now who's had their visits to Ohio State canceled. Kamari Ramsey was supposed to officially visit earlier this week, but that trip was canceled. So it definitely seems like we're, based on these their pursuit of safeties and running backs, with Hayden now in the fold, and how they potentially feel with Zion Branch and Xavier Nwangpa, that could have influenced the decisions of Williams and then Hampton, and then also Ramsey, the fact that they won't be in town this week. So those were the major changes. We did have one addition, however. Ryan Turner, who's a cornerback commit for the Buckeyes, he was supposed to officially visit 2 weekends ago, if you recall, but he will be in town this weekend, which is huge because, as we're going to get into this official visitors list, he's teammates with Kenyatta Jackson, who's a big-time target for Ohio State along the defensive line, and Jackson's going to be in town for an official this weekend too. So that's something that was noteworthy. Although they would have liked, Turner in town a couple of weekends ago with some of those targets they had, it will be good to get him, with his teammate, his high school teammate, and get him in his ear a little bit during this weekend. So those were kind of the changes that we saw compared to what we were expecting. But even then, it's still a very talented list, as we'll get into, very talented list of prospects that are visiting this weekend.
Yeah, with a pair of commits coming in, you already mentioned Ryan Turner, and then you have Jaheim Singletary, and let's kind of focus on each of them here before we get into the uncommitted players. I mean, with Jaheim Singletary, he, has not, he shut it down, but hasn't shut it down. So there's, certainly concern out there amongst many that how long can you hold on to a commitment, especially from a prospect out of the state of Florida. I think it's going to be super critical for them to be able to maybe curb the wandering eye a little bit. And then obviously with Turner, you hit the nail right on the head with him traveling with Kenyatta Jackson, teammates there at Chaminade Madonna. It's going to be important for them to be together. And as I've said on shows plenty of times, I don't buy the package deal 99.9% of the time. I don't buy a package deal here. But it's never a bad thing to have a friend already before anything happens.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be releasing my visitor preview here shortly after our podcast is published, and I note in there that they haven't been, two guys who've said they're going to be package deal no matter what at the next level. They did have some similar schools in common. Clemson also being one of the ones that Turner was considering, that Jackson is considering. So that was kind of an option, but they weren't dead set on being a package deal at the next level. But then again, Jackson did tweet after Turner's commitment. He said future teammates, question mark. So, maybe that was just a little bit of a tease for the fans, but it's something that is in play, and Jackson is really high on Ohio State. I think they're a top 2 or top 3 school for them, and maybe Turner's that extra, gives them that extra push that they need in their pursuit of Jackson. But along with Jackson being in town, you're going to get a few other big-time defensive linemen. Chris McClellan, whose recruitment has blown up. His stock has gone up pretty big time over the past few months. He went from a 3-star to a top 100 player in the country. He's going to be in town. Gabe Dindy, the number 34 overall 2022 prospect on Rivals, will be in town. And then Eni White out of Pennsylvania is also going to be in town. So Larry Johnson's going to have his hands full here. That's one of the reasons why, we can't stop talking about JTT, can we? That's one of the reasons why I said JTT, it probably would have been best if Ohio State had gotten him that weekend prior, just because Johnson's going to have his hands full this weekend with all the recruits that are going to be in town. It's a wealth of defensive lineman talent that are going to be, in Columbus this weekend. And a couple of them I'm feeling really good about for Ohio State's chances with, namely McClellan and Jackson. And also you have to consider White there too. So, definitely could be a big weekend for Ohio State, but I'm not really expecting a commitment to follow, as was the case with Hayden earlier this week.
Right, and you kind of broached upon my next question to a certain extent, and taking the commits, the 2 that are already committed off the board or whatever, of all of the official visits that are designated as the 25th. I mean, we already, we had a couple of earlier visits this week with Tyler Booker and Terrence Brooks, who were listed as midweek visits. What is the visit that intrigues you the most?
Sorry, Kevin, can you repeat that? You cut off a little bit.
I said, taking Singletary and Turner, who are both committed to Ohio State right now. What is the visit that is on tap for this weekend that intrigues you the most?
Yeah, I think McClellan's is probably the most interesting one for me, just because, Ohio State kind of got in a little bit early for him. I know he did receive some big time offers before Ohio State offered him on April 1st, but he was really impressed with how quickly that offer from the Buckeyes did arrive. And, his recruitment has blown up, but Ohio State has kind of maintained themselves near the top of his leaderboard, and getting that last visit of the month, leaving that strong impression on him, can be really important for the Buckeyes. I don't know if he would make a decision shortly after. He kind of seems like somebody who will stretch his recruitment out a little bit longer, but McClellan is that one guy who went from an unknown to, potentially an option for Ohio State at the next level, in a similar way that Hero Kanu was, as well, because Kanu got an offer, I believe, in April. He was somewhat of an unknown prospect prior to the beginning of the spring season, and now, you have him future casted to Ohio State. I think Ohio State has a really good shot with him, and McClellan's kind of in that same boat as well. So McClellan's kind of the one that interests me the most. I am kind of intrigued by Cam Dewberry to some extent, just because he always says the right things about Ohio State. He says that they were his dream school. He grew up watching them, and Ohio State has that Texas to Columbus pipeline that they built that is continuing to be strong. So maybe he's somebody who takes a visit to Ohio State and they could drastically improve their chances with him. But I would say out of the official visitors for this weekend, McClellan would be the one that's most intriguing to me.
So that's kind of how we shape up with the official visits. For those of you who watch our online product, we did a show earlier in the week, so I'm trying to keep these things separate as much as possible so we're not just reciting everything we said earlier in the week. But be sure to check that out as well, where we kind of went in through what's gone on through Ohio State's camps and whatnot. It certainly has been a tremendous run through June. And, I've talked to a lot of recruiting fans out there, and there's kind of a mixed bag. Some have been very excited with what's happened. Some have been a little, dare I say, underwhelmed that there's just not been this run of commitments. But, I think that June visits could lead to July commitments myself. What is your impression of just the past what is it now, 25 days or whatever, just the month of June to this point, what do you take out of it?
Well, Kevin, I don't know what exact episode this was, but I remember a few weeks ago saying that the line for commitment should be at 2.5. I thought that was a reasonable expectation, and then people rightfully were like, no, it should be higher, it should be 4.5, and I was like, okay, 4.5 it is. I'll go to that. I'm not really too surprised by what happened because, with this 2022 class and 2023 class, these are guys who aren't making emotional decisions all the time. They're not going to take a visit and then, commit. Sure, we have seen that. But I wouldn't even classify a guy like Dallin Hayden as an emotional commitment. I just thought it was, he visited Ohio State, saw what he needed to see, and was ready to make his decision after meeting the coaching staff in person. But, these guys are very, understanding of the process. They realize that there's 6 months left until they sign. They don't want to commit and then potentially back out for the most part. So from what I'm seeing right now, 2 commitments from, Caleb Brown, a top 100 overall player, and then Dallin Hayden, who Ohio State likes enough to the point where they're done recruiting running backs. This isn't a case where they're looking for a 2 running back class because, they don't know about the other. They're very satisfied with Hayden's skill set, and they like what he brings to the table. So I although it isn't the 4 or 5 or 6 commitments or even more that some people were expecting, I think this was kind of right in line with what I was initially expecting from the program, just because, look, numbers are going to crunch, of course, as commitments come down the line, and kids want to make sure that they take their spot early, or if you're a top guy, you evaluate your options and maybe you have a little bit of some more space, some more time to make your commitment. So everyone's kind of in a different position, and some commitments lead to other factors being in play too. So Dallin Hayden leads to Amarian Hampton not visiting. Caleb Brown kind of leads to some other changes in the wide receiver recruiting process as well. So I'm not really too surprised by what's gone on here. I think they probably end up with 3 by the end of the month. I'm going to make a kind of a bold prediction here that they get one more commitment, whether it's 2022 or 2023. But I'm not really too surprised. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm not really, surprised either, even though I sat there and said, oh, it could be 4 or whatever. But, I thought that maybe we might see 2023 popping a little faster, and want to jump in with a little, breaking news in terms of somebody who didn't commit to Ohio State but was a target. Curtis Neal, the defensive tackle out of Cornelius, North Carolina, just went to social announcing his commitment to the Badgers. So you have that now. But, back to the question, you see all the recruits, you see Quinn Ewers, you see whoever going out there, and it's like a lot of booms are coming. I think the thing not to get lost on is a lot of times there are booms that happen, and then we go 6 weeks before the player comes out and goes public. Now, I also do think that there are a lot of kids that commit and then go on another visit and commit and then go on another visit and then commit and so on and so on. But, I think that there's been a very interesting dance going on in terms of some players are able to come in and commit at whatever point that they want to. Some guys may need to kind of just see what the board looks like because the staff isn't ready really to take anybody because they're still evaluating. There's just a lot going on there. So I wouldn't look at this month and be like, well, 2 commits, and even if they get to 3, which is Joseph's number right there, wouldn't it be great if that third one was JTT, by the way, just to keep talking about him. But if they get to 3 or 3.5 or what have you, I still think that with recruiting being closed as long as it was, for them to pull off 7 camps, to pull off 4 huge recruiting visit weekends, along with some midweek visits, everything that's gone on. I mean, these are the efforts. These are the pillars that will build the foundation on for classes of 23 and 24 and everything going on from there. And I think anybody who's worried about the recruiting acumen of Ryan Day probably just hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah, and Kevin, it's not like these official visitors that, some people were expecting to pop to Ohio State are committing elsewhere. It's not like Zion Branch now off the table or Zach Rice or even JTT. It's, like these guys are taking their visits. These are young kids. They've gone over a year without being able to take these trips. Some of them may have been caught up in the moment, and it may have seemed like Ohio State was gonna get a boom from them that following their visits, but at the end of the day, the common message I hear from parents, from recruits, is that you don't want to make a commitment decision. You want to make, a visit decision. You want to make a lifetime decision. So you don't want to go off of the emotions of a great visit because, truth be told, these schools are going to, put on really great presentations. These top kids are going to some of the top programs in the country, and they're going to have some of the best facilities, some of the best academics, some of the best presentations. So, the separation, the separation between these programs is very small for some. And it comes to those relationships with the coaching staff, the culture, the even depth, depth at their position. So there's a lot of factors that play into this. And at the end of the day, I think that Ohio State fans should be satisfied with what's happened so far. A lot of their big-time targets, a lot of Ohio State's big-time targets are still on the board. They were able to land two prospects that the program was really high on, and maybe they land JTT, and that kind of makes up for the lack of 2 or 3 other 2022 or 2023 commits that they were initially expecting. But overall, I think it's a solid month. It's the reception that I've heard from recruits, their parents, the family members. It's all been great. So that's all you could have hoped for if you're Ohio State. And now you can go in, evaluate these kids' senior season. Maybe some other guys hop onto the board that probably wouldn't have, elsewise. So I think it's definitely a very encouraging month for Ohio State, just based on how many players they hosted, how many camps they put on, the offers that were extended. I think they made some really good progress.
And there you go. Here, we're here on a Friday, getting the Friday news dump early. So I think we're going to call it a show before anything else changes. Wouldn't it just be typical that before I'm able to post this, that JTT makes another decision or something? So we're gonna call this show at this point so we can get a little life out of it. Joseph, I want to thank you for being part of the show going into the weekend. Have a great weekend. I know that you will be busy chasing down players on the tail end of it, and who knows, if news warrants, we may even jump in with something quickly on Monday before I get on that plane and head to the beach.
Absolutely, Kevin. Once again, thank you so much for having me on. And yes, definitely a very good way for Ohio State to end this final weekend of June here for official visitors. And I'm wishing you the best of luck on your visit. Your official visit on your vacation here that you're going to be taking. So good luck to you on that.
Absolutely. I'm already committed to the beach. If I could find a way to make, and it would be a 40-year decision. I'm fully on board there. But thank you, Joseph. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening to the BIA podcast here on a Friday afternoon. Once again, in case you're joining us late, I don't know how you do that on a podcast that's recorded, but in case you're joining us late, JTT, the talented 2021 defensive tackle, defensive end, what have you, has canceled his Alabama visit. He will be deciding from a list of 4 schools: Ohio State, Oregon, USC, and Washington. No date on when that decision is coming, but expect it soon. We have it locked in here at Buckeye Grove and BIA. Be sure to take advantage of our promo, Visits 2021. Email me at kevin@buckeyegrove.com if you have any questions. But with that, I wish everybody a healthy and happy and safe weekend, and go Bucks.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at buckeyegrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.